Careen Chepchumba was born on 9th February 1986 in Nandi County. She was the firstborn in a family of 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy, and a loving daughter to her mother Cecilia Kili and stepfather Hosea Kili. Although Careen grew up in an upper-class family, she was very dedicated to her academics. She attended Loreto Limuru High School, one of the top national girls' high schools in the country, before joining the University of Eastern Africa, Baraton, in 2004. There, she pursued a Bachelor of Science in Electronics, majoring in telecommunications engineering. Despite being one of the only 2 women in her class, Careen was determined to graduate. Those who knew her on campus noted she was focused and always in a hurry to class or church. Welcome to Silent Shadows. As always, if you appreciate our true crime storytelling, support our fortnightly series by liking and subscribing. Together we uncover compelling tales of crimes and mysteries in Kenya and beyond, presenting well-balanced narratives that respect the victims and their loved ones. It was while at university that Careen met Mercy Keino, who became her friend. Unfortunately, their deaths, only 8 months apart, would be shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions, making them some of the biggest cold cases in Kenya. Nicknamed Chumba by her family and friends, Careen was a go-getter and a lovely individual with a gorgeous smile. She was also a social butterfly and loved jazz music, as seen in her avid contributions to the Capital Jazz Club on Facebook. She graduated from the University of Eastern Africa, Baraton, presumably between 2008 and 2009. Following her graduation, Careen was determined to build a career in telecommunication engineering, and in 2009, she got a job at Kenya Power in Nairobi, where she worked as a telecommunication support assistant in the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunication. During this time, Careen still lived with her family at Rose Park Apartments in Kilimani, Nairobi. Although the Kili family seemed like the picture-perfect family to outsiders, all was not hunky-dory behind the closed doors of the apartment, as we will see. It was at Rose Park Apartments that Careen crossed paths with Louis Otieno, who lived in the apartment directly below Careen's family. At the time, he was the golden boy of Kenyan television. Louis Armstrong Otieno, whose mother, Elizabeth Omolo, was a pioneering TV presenter on the government-owned television channel Voice of Kenya, now known as KBC, went on to become the most sought-after and highest-paid primetime news anchor in Kenya, working for all the top television channels in the country. His career began at KBC, after which he transitioned to Nation TV, where he co-hosted primetime news with Beatrice Marshall. Following his tenure at Nation TV, he moved to KTN. He was then poached by Citizen TV, where he became the highest-paid news anchor in the country. He worked at Citizen TV until October of 2009, when he joined K24, where he remained until March of 2011, when he was fired. On the Kenyan silver screen, Louis Otieno was best known for his striking looks, confidence, and good command of the English language. Notably, he pioneered live interviews on Kenyan TV with hard-hitting political interviews featuring leading politicians at the time, such as John Mishuki, Ole Kiapi, and Martha Karua.
Professor, pleasure to have you back.
Thank you.
I know you've been out there speaking to Kenyans as far as wide as you can go.
Yes.
And I've been watching, and I'm just thinking back, and I'm wondering, we grow up, we have dreams. We're at the age where all of us want to be a pilot or a doctor, then we want to be a teacher, and then we want to be more definitive things. But for you, when did this come to you? 10 years ago? 20 years ago?
Beyond his career, Louis was married with 2 kids, but became separated from his wife and children due to allegations of infidelity. Sadly, like many of his peers in the industry, fame and money for Louis came with a swelling ego, which allegedly made his colleagues deem him very hard to work with. He also allegedly lived a fast life, involving numerous women and alcohol, and his poor life choices led to him being involved in several scandals. One of the first scandals Louis Otieno was involved in was his public relationship with legendary musician Susan Gashukia, following her 2007 divorce from revered veteran producer Gido Kibokusia. These scandals, along with his reputation for being difficult to work with, contributed to the gradual decline of Louis Otieno's high-flying career. According to Louis' account of events, he first encountered Careen around the 2010 Christmas festivities. At the time, He was working at K24 and he claims he was driving into Rose Park Apartments when Careen approached him, asking to borrow the key to the front door, which was shared by the tenants. Careen explained that she was going out with her cousins for dinner and wouldn't be able to open the shared front door upon her return, since her parents had left with the key. Louie obliged and gave her the key. They also exchanged numbers so that when Careen returned, she would call him to return the key. Keeping her word, Careen called him around 1 a.m. to pick up his key. Following this encounter, the two remained cordial, occasionally greeting each other whenever they crossed paths at the apartment complex. Another incident that brought them closer, according to Louie, was when Careen was locked out of her apartment one evening. She found him relaxing on his balcony and requested to stay in his apartment until she could access her family home. The two allegedly engaged in small talk and got to know each other better, becoming friends from that day forward. It soon became the norm for Careen to frequently sneak into Louie's apartment without her family's knowledge, and although Louie denied that their relationship was romantic, honestly, it had all the markers of one. Careen's parents eventually found out about her alleged relationship with Louie, marking the beginning of a long-standing feud between Careen, her parents, and Louis Otieno. The feud would outlive Careen because even in her death, there continued to be a lot of blame shifting between her parents and her alleged boyfriend. Hosea Kelly, Careen's stepfather, maintained that he found out about the relationship in March of 2011 when Careen's mother told him. He claims he was not happy with the relationship because, to his knowledge, Louie, although separated from his wife, was still a married man with children. His disapproval allegedly grew when Careen started being dishonest. He recounted in court an incident in the same month, March 2011, when Careen had not returned home by 11 p.m. and as expected, they were worried. When he called her, she claimed to still be at the office, but he later discovered she was downstairs at Louie's apartment. Additionally, both of Careen's parents alleged that around this time, money started disappearing from their home where they lived with their 4 children. Specifically, Hosea claimed he lost 10,000 Kenyan shillings, and upon calling for a family meeting, Careen confessed to have taken the money to cater to Louie's expenses. As a result, her parents vehemently opposed the relationship and repeatedly asked Careen to stop seeing Louie. Careen's stepfather even went to the extent of trying to get the landlord to evict Louie from his apartment. On Louie's end, he alleged that Careen's conservative parents were against the association to the point where Careen confessed to him that she had been beaten by her parents for her association with him. On one occasion, she allegedly came to his apartment with a rather juvenile letter for them to sign. The letter was supposedly drafted by her stepfather and it read, "I will not be your friend anymore and you will not be my friend." Another time, Louie alleged that Careen sought refuge at his apartment at midnight, following a physical altercation with her stepfather who allegedly threatened to kill her. This was followed by another incident where Louie recounted Careen rushed to his house, followed by her mother and stepfather who had a big stick. They allegedly had an altercation on the staircase, where her father accused Louie of confusing their daughter with his money and fame. When Careen's relationship with her parents remained strained, she and Louie decided that the solution was for her to move out of her parents' house. Louie admits to have helped Careen find an apartment and move out in July of 2011. As per her parents' testimony, she moved out to Santoni Apartments in Kilimani, while her entire family was up country for her uncle's burial. Careen had failed to travel with them and had promised to join them later, but she did not show up. To their utter shock, when they returned to Nairobi, her parents learned that she had moved out of the family home. Apparently, when her mother called to inquire about her whereabouts, Careen asserted she wanted to be independent and refused to disclose her new residence. Her parents alleged they were forced to investigate her whereabouts after her stepfather claimed to have lost 600,000 Kenyan shillings, which was in the house when Careen moved out. Hosea then summoned Careen to the family house to inquire about the missing money. Careen claimed she had given it to a woman named Sandra at Santoni Apartments. Nonetheless, during the investigations, Careen's parents could not find anyone by that name at the apartment complex. Instead, they found 200,000 Kenyan shillings in Careen's apartment. After persistent questioning, Careen confessed to them that she had given the remaining money to Louie, who needed it for medical services due to his struggle with a pancreatic ailment. Although Careen managed to move out of her parents' house and avoided the alleged physical abuse, she continued to face other challenges. Careen was described as sickly, struggling with diabetes, and she was also struggling with significant psychological issues. For example, Louie claimed that Careen confided in him about being intimately abused by the man she thought was her father, and that her mother was aware but had asked her to remain silent. This alleged abuse was further brought to light when Dennis Onsarigo, the journalist behind Case Files, which first investigated Careen's murder, raised questions on Twitter, now X, in February of 2024 about the appropriateness of Careen's relationship with her stepfather. Dennis Onsarigo also alleged that Careen's parents physically and verbally abused her, calling her nasty names. His post, as seen here, read by Pat. Careen would spend hours on the phone with her stepfather, unknown to many, engaging in lazy chats to the astonishment of her workmates, who found the calls a bit long and awkward. Careen would pack the father's traveling bag. She would know when he traveled, what he would wear, and when he would return. At one point, one of our parents called her up, and at times they would team up to beat her up. Beyond the aforementioned challenges that Careen continued to face after moving out of her parents' house, she also found herself facing significant financial challenges, sinking deeper into debt by the day, and straining relationships with close friends and family. Allegedly, Careen incurred these debts while financing Louie's medical bills, basic necessities like rent, school fees for his children, and also financing his lifestyle. It's astonishing how quickly she accumulated millions of Kenyan shillings in debt within just a few months of meeting Louie. Equally concerning are the lies she spun to secure loans from people. For instance, in 2011, she deceived one Eli Kimani and Dr. Motende into believing they would be her partners in a non-existent maize business, acquiring 1.25 million Kenyan shillings from them. When she failed to repay them, Eli contacted Careen's stepfather to intervene, but to no avail. Similarly, in October of the same year, she borrowed 800,000 Kenyan shillings from her uncle, Edward Bitok, claiming it was for a printing machine for her fictitious printing business. In that same month, she also borrowed 200,000 Kenyan shillings from her friend, Paul Ngugi, saying she needed the money since she had developed an addiction to prescription drugs and needed to go to South Africa for drug rehabilitation. Paul noted that he only lent her 50,000 Kenyan shillings, which at the time was sufficient for her to purchase an air ticket to South Africa. When Careen failed to pay him back, Paul, who was familiar with her stepfather, also reported the matter to him. It is important to know that Careen did not have a prescription pills addiction, but Louie did. According to an interview that Louie's mother, Elizabeth Omolo, did with the Nation newspaper, she noted that following a health challenge with his back, Louie developed an unhealthy dependency on painkillers. This means that some of the money Careen borrowed went into supporting Louie to beat the addiction. Additionally, in January of 2012, days before Careen mysteriously passed away, she attempted to borrow her uncle by the name Silas a total of 1.2 million Kenyan shillings for her imaginary maize business. Silas, who found the sum of money outlandish, told his brother Edward the story. Remember, Edward is the other uncle Careen had borrowed 800,000 Kenyan shillings for her non-existent printing business. Edward warned his brother Silas against lending Careen the money, and suspecting something was off, Silas called Careen's stepfather to report the incidents. But Careen would continue sinking into debt, as in early February 2012, just days before her death, she called one Manasseh Mwaura, a liquor shop manager at a duty-free shop in Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, to place an order for Davidoff cigars worth 310 USD, which is approximately 41,000 Kenyan shillings today. She promised to pay via M-Pesa and sent a driver to pick up the cigars, but she failed to make the payment. I'm sure you might be wondering why Careen allegedly financed Louie's lifestyle when he was a big shot in the media space. When Careen met Louie around December of 2010, he was working at K24. He had been poached in October of 2009 from Citizen TV by Rose Kamotho, the station's owner at the time, with the hope of attracting viewers to K24 by leveraging Louie's brand. Louie's move to K24 came with a promise of a very good pay and a management position. To his dismay, Rose Kamotho's controversial loan with the Kenyatta family-owned NCBA Bank of 12 million Kenyan shillings, which suspiciously ballooned to 70 million Kenyan shillings, put K24 in dire financial trouble. This meant Louie's salary was drastically reduced, and it was not enough to sustain the lifestyle he had been accustomed to as the top-paid news presenter in the country while at Citizen TV. According to Rose, the K24 staff would even sometimes go for months without pay. New investors by the name Africa Kenya Holdings, a company linked to the Kenyatta family, came in to buy Rose out of the debt. These new investors allegedly hired some of Louie's former bosses from previous media houses to manage K24. These were the bosses with whom Louie had parted ways acrimoniously, and according to him, they were out for revenge. This led to Louie being fired from the station in March of 2011. At this time, remember, Careen was still living at her parents' house, and it was then that her parents discovered their relationship and noticed the money that had started disappearing from the house. Although Louie continues to deny that he had a romantic relationship with Careen, key witnesses who encountered the two said otherwise. For example, when Louie and Careen went to a car dealership to buy a car, Louie introduced Careen as his wife to the car dealer, John Derrito. John further claimed that when he generated a receipt for Careen, she gave him her full name as Careen Chepchumba Armstrong, Armstrong being Louie's middle name. The guards at Careen's apartment also maintained that Louie would frequent Careen's one-bedroom apartment and would even often sleep over. Further proof that Careen and Louie were more than friends. Burdened by the many debts she was sinking in on the evening of Friday, 10th February 2012, just a few days before her gruesome murder, Careen went to her stepfather's office and she left him a letter which was dated 6th February 2012. The letter read, "Dear Dad, I really don't know where to start. I have so much to say. It's been a tough year for you and Mom. The worry I have put you through, the pain, the upset, it has been so hard for the family. All the misery was caused because of my selfish, conflicted, and unreasonable behavior. I've thought about it, and now I know why I chose the path that I did. Why I fell in love with a man so horrible, so manipulative, a predator who takes advantage of innocence and vulnerability. I was young, trusting, and unassuming. Why did I not respect you? Why did I do the things that hurt you so much? I have stolen, lied, and a host of other unbelievable things that put me into a deep pit. I can never take that back. For a long time, I wasn't thinking. I simply did not think. And then, it all wasn't wrong. I didn't think about the consequences, the hurt, the pain that you would feel as a result of my actions. Before I knew it, I had done wrong and disappointed you. I'm sorry. I sincerely want to become a much better person, better than what I ever was. The past few months have been a huge life lesson. I've learned of things I never knew existed. I'm going to show you how much you mean to me. Do the little things that make you smile inside and out, make you proud. From now on, I will make good decisions which will benefit us all, and in the long run, make you a happier man. I love you, Dad. I aim to love you more than I ever have. I respect, honor, and treasure you and Mom. Signed, CK. 2 days later, on Sunday, 12th February 2012, Careen invited Ellie, the guy she had borrowed 1.25 million Kenyan shillings from, to her flat at Santoni Apartments in Kilimani. Ellie tipped Careen's stepfather about the invitation and tagged him along for the visit. Careen was allegedly shocked to see her stepfather alongside Ellie. Her stepfather claims to have convinced Careen and Ellie that they have a meeting at his family home at Rose Park Apartments. The three of them, Ellie, Careen, and her stepfather, headed for Rose Park Apartments. Upon arrival, her stepfather called three other people whom Careen owed money. These are Edward, Paul, and Silas. In the meeting that started at around 6 p.m., Careen confessed to owing more people money than the ones present. She explained that Louis was milking her dry financially for his medical bills, maintenance of his estranged wife, and school fees for his children. She also claimed to have spent, for example, 450,000 Kenyan shillings to pay a lady called Susan for Louis' business partnership in a creative studio, and that she had paid medical bills for Louis at Nairobi Hospital and for his rehabilitation in South Africa for his drugs dependency. During the meeting, the parties present established that Careen owed more than 3 million Kenyan shillings to different people, and it was evident that the common denominator was Louis Otieno. During the meeting, they also agreed on a way forward for Careen to pay all her debts, which included her stepfather assisting her to pay the biggest debt, amounting to 1.25 million Kenyan shillings. For the rest of her debts, Careen was to instruct her employer Kenya Power to deduct 20,000 Kenyan shillings monthly towards the settlement of the said debts. She was also to sell her household items to pay some of the debts and move back home. They also agreed that she was to report Louis to the police with the hopes of him repaying the money she had spent on him. Her stepfather also noted that during the meeting, Careen's phone was continuously ringing, and when Careen's mother took the phone, she discovered that it was Louis who was calling incessantly. The meeting ended at around 8:30 p.m. and Careen prepared a meal for her family. Unfortunately, this would be their last meal together. After they had eaten, her stepfather tried to convince her to stay with them for the night, but she insisted on going back to her apartment. Her brother Emmanuel took Careen to her house at Santonia Apartments, where he dropped her off and said goodbye before driving back home. The following day, Monday, 13th February 2012, Careen was supposed to go to her parents' house at Rose Park Apartments in Kilimani after work, but unfortunately, she did not show up. Her mother tried calling her several times, but the calls went unanswered, and then her calls could not go through. Careen's mother let things rest, but she got concerned the following day, on Tuesday, 14th February 2012, as she still could not get hold of Careen. She even called her workplace and was told that Careen had not reported to work. Careen's mother, Cecilia, then headed with Emmanuel, Careen's brother, to Santonia Apartments to find out why Careen was not picking her calls. They got to Santonia Apartments at around 10 a.m. and Emmanuel went up to Careen's apartment, which was apartment number A17, to check up on her. Emmanuel claims that when he got to the door, he rang the doorbell once, and having received no response, he knocked on the door. Again, there was no response, and he therefore tried to turn the doorknob and found out that the door was closed, but not locked. He let himself into Careen's apartment, and once in the sitting room, he claims that he called her name 3 times, but there was no response. He further noted that he looked into the kitchen and saw 2 used glasses next to the sink, indicating that Careen had hosted someone recently. Emmanuel then went to the bedroom, where he found music playing from a laptop, and Careen tucked neatly in bed as if she was asleep. He asserts that he called out her name again, but she did not answer, and then he left the apartment and closed the main door, as he left to inform her mother that Careen was in the house but was deep asleep. What is puzzling is why Careen's brother did not find it suspicious when he found the main door unlocked. Additionally, why did he not try touching Careen to wake her up? I mean, that's something a sibling would do, you know? Emmanuel claims that when he got downstairs and told his mother that Careen was asleep, his mother instructed that they go together to see Careen. When they got to Careen's apartments, Cecilia instructed Emmanuel to open the windows since the house was stuffy, and after opening the windows, Emmanuel said he stood at the balcony door enjoying the scenery. In Careen's bedroom, her mother maintains that Careen was neatly tucked in bed, and she suspected that someone else had tucked her in. She then shook Careen, attempting to wake her up, but that was when she realized that her daughter was deceased, and she started screaming. Emmanuel, who was still on the balcony, was startled by the scream, and he rushed to see what was wrong, only to find Careen lying on the bed with dryish liquid oozing from the side of her mouth. Her nostrils were stuffed with cotton wool, which was soaked in blood, and there was also vomit on the floor. Following this shocking discovery, Emmanuel called his father immediately. Given that Careen was found neatly tucked in bed with cotton wool in her nose, suggests that the person who took her life had a personal connection to her, and the attention to detail indicates that the person was methodical and deliberate in their actions. This might suggest that the crime was premeditated, and the perpetrator took steps to ensure that everything was in order before leaving the scene. Careen's father got to Santonia apartment, and soon after the police arrived and started processing the scene. It was from this very start that they would bungle the investigations, as you will see. At the scene, the police found several notes that Careen had written. One of the notes, which was dated Sunday, 12th February 2012, had been torn to pieces and thrown into the dustbin. It was a letter addressed to her dad, in which Careen complains about spending so much money on Louie for various expenses. The police speculated that Careen wrote this letter after she got back to her house from the intervention with her family and the people she owed money to. The police also recovered another note dated Friday, 4th November 2011, seemingly addressed to Careen's stepfather and written by Louie. The letter said, "We may be sworn enemies, but put that nonsense aside for a moment. Careen may be gravely ill. She is potentially suffering multiple organ failure as diagnosed by a doctor in a Nairobi hospital. They have said that she has a very weak heart, one sick kidney, and a sick thyroid. Signed, Louis Otieno." This note raised various questions for the investigators, including whether it could have been written immediately before or immediately after Careen lost her life, but backdated to act as a cover-up so that third parties would believe that Careen died from a grave illness. They also recovered a total of 12 receipts from Nairobi Hospital in the name of Louis Armstrong Otieno. The receipts totaled to approximately 489,000 Kenyan shillings, which was evidence that Careen was indeed supporting Louie financially. As a result, the police summoned Louie to Kilimani police station for interrogation. During the interrogation, Louie maintained that he had last seen Careen about 2 weeks back, and that he had been in Magadi from 11th February to 14th February 2012, shooting a video with a friend. He stated that he could not have been involved in Careen's murder. The security guards at Careen's apartment confirmed Louie's story that he had not visited Careen on the day she was murdered, and that the last time Louie had visited Careen was 2 weeks earlier at around 11 p.m. and he left at around 1 a.m. Nonetheless, the investigators did take blood samples and fingernail clippings from Louie for DNA analysis. However, when it came to Louie's phone data that would have helped the police establish his location during the murder, his phones were switched off during his time in Magadi, making it difficult for the police to truly ascertain his whereabouts using his phone data. Even before the police had wrapped up the investigations, Louis Otieno was prosecuted in the court of public opinion, with media houses where Louis had made some powerful enemies, pushing the narrative that he was somehow involved in Careen's death. Louis even had to address the public alongside his lawyer, Philip Murgo, stating that he did not have anything to do with Careen's death.
My attention has been drawn to various media articles regarding the unfortunate death of a friend, Careen. The articles unfortunately have suggested that I am wanted or being sought by the police as a suspect. In addition, the articles have suggested that I am on the run, which is absolutely false. The effects of the articles is the effect of casting aspersions on my reputation, for which I'm presently seeking legal advice with a view to taking appropriate action. The fact is that following the unfortunate demise of Careen, a number of persons, all of whom knew the deceased in one way or another, have been contacted by the police to determine whether or not they have useful information regarding the incident. I confirm that I have been in touch with the police at Kilimani Police Division on several occasions, as is the case with several other persons, and I am certain that I will be cleared of any wrongdoing or event that could have led to the unfortunate death of Careen. Finally, I would like to assure the Kenyan public that I am totally innocent, and I have no doubt that I will be vindicated at the end of the investigations.
Careen was taken to Louie Funeral Home, and an autopsy was conducted on Thursday, 16 February 2012 by government pathologist Dr. Johansen Odur and Dr. Moses Njue, who was hired by the family. The autopsy report established that Careen had been strangled, and she also had defensive injuries on her forearm, which showed that Careen had attempted to fight off her killer. The pathologists also suspected that, prior to her death, Careen had had an intimate encounter, prompting them to do a swab, which was sent to the government chemist lab to establish if the perpetrator had left behind any seminal fluids. Sadly, the swab sent to the government chemist lab did not contain any seminal fluids, suggesting the perpetrator used protection and was very careful. The forensic team also did not find any traces of seminal fluids on Careen's bedding or clothes. But given the incompetence of the forensic team, it is probable that the government chemist lab mishandled the analysis of these crucial pieces of evidence, affecting the results. The investigators' incompetence was evident throughout this case. For example, they neglected to examine Careen's body at the scene for fibers or hairs that could be used as evidence. Moreover, they failed to dust for fingerprints in Careen's house, particularly on the bedding, the door handles, and the water glasses next to the sink. Furthermore, no forensic analysis was conducted on Careen's phone or laptop. When it came to the materials crucial for DNA profiling, including her bedding and the clothes she was wearing, they were analyzed by the government analyst 4 years after her death. This delay likely resulted in significant deterioration or destruction of DNA evidence. Surprisingly, the government analyst attributed the delay to, among other things, the lack of chemical reagents. In a more surprising turn of events, Louie's fingernail clippings collected for analysis at the beginning of the investigations were mysteriously replaced with Careen's fingernail clippings, according to court documents. It could be said the investigators were doing everything they can to bungle this investigation. All these errors can't just be incompetency or sheer mistakes. We could say they were deliberately trying not to find Careen's killer. On the other hand, the guards at Careen's apartment told the police that they had last seen Careen on Sunday, 12 February 2012, when her brother had dropped her off, and they were certain that Careen did not receive any visitors between that day and when she was discovered deceased. They did, however, highlight that on Saturday, 9 February 2012, Careen received a male visitor who registered his name at the gate using a pseudonym, Large, and the guard failed to register his car's number plates because Careen had instructed him not to. The police also failed to follow up on this lead and establish the identity of this person who had visited Careen under a pseudonym and what his relationship with Careen was. Honestly, at this rate, if the perpetrator had left his photo at the crime scene, the police would still have failed to catch him. Either the police handling the investigation were highly incompetent, or someone paid them to mess up the forensic evidence collection and analysis. Let us know what you think in the comments below. 11 days after her untimely demise, Careen Chepchumba Kili was buried at their family home in Baraton, Nandi County on Friday, 24 February 2012. What was shocking during the burial was the fact that Careen's stepfather declared that they had forgiven the killer.
Like Jesus extended a hand of forgiveness, an offer of life hereafter to the robber in the cross. I want to offer the same opportunity to whoever did this heinous act.
This declaration was very odd for a parent whose daughter had been brutally murdered and the killer was still at large. Let us know in the comments what you make of this. Since there was no evidence linking anyone to Careen's death, the director of public prosecution at the time, Kiraiko Tobiko, ordered an inquest into Careen's death in 2012. The inquest started on 25th May 2016. It is important to highlight at this point that one of the reasons the inquest into Careen's death was delayed to start by 4 years was because key witnesses, including Careen's parents, allegedly failed to avail themselves in court, which is very perplexing because typically in cases involving the death of a loved one, especially a child, one would expect the parents to be highly motivated to seek justice and closure. Throughout the inquest, a total of 31 witnesses testified. During the proceedings, it was established that the police bungled the case and that Careen was indeed financing Louie and taking care of him financially. Louis Otieno and Careen's parents were also caught in a blame game, with Careen's parents accusing Louie of using their daughter for money and Louie accusing Careen's stepfather of being physically, verbally, and intimately abusive. The inquest came to an end on 19th January 2018. Magistrate Charles Ondeki ruled that the evidence presented in court was insufficient to hold any person, including Louie, culpable of Careen's murder. The judge then instructed that fresh investigations into Careen's death be conducted, focusing on forensic analysis, specifically communications made by and the geolocation of Louis Armstrong Otieno between Sunday 12 February 2012 and Tuesday 14 February 2012, when Careen's lifeless body was found in her bedroom. The magistrate also ordered that fresh fingernail clippings be taken from Louie for DNA analysis in the presence of the head of the government chemist lab. Following the ruling, Louie asserted that he would only be open to participating in the fresh investigations if Careen's stepfather and brother also submitted their DNA samples. Expectedly, although fresh investigations into Careen's death were ordered by the magistrate, no progress has been made on the same. Again, the question remains, why are Careen's parents not pushing for the investigations to be conducted afresh? I mean, they even have the financial means to hire the best lawyers and private forensic investigators if they wanted to. It has been 12 years since Careen's life was tragically taken away by an unknown assailant. Her case remains complex and raises more questions than it offers answers. One thing is clear, the person who took her life was well known to her. The case would have been solved quickly if the police had performed their duties effectively, particularly in evidence collection and analysis. They should have definitely broadened the investigation beyond Louie, considering other suspects. For instance, Careen had a volatile relationship with her family. Dennis Onsarigo, the case file's host, highlighted this in a tweet where he mentioned that a neighbor, allegedly speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested that Careen's mother must know who killed her daughter. This indicates there was more to Careen's family dynamics than met the eye, warranting an investigation into her family. Additionally, the police should have looked into individuals to whom Careen owed money, also her neighbors, and even explored new theories such as whether Careen was seeing someone else besides Louie. Careen's family maintains a low profile regarding her death and prefers to lead a private life away from the media spotlight. In contrast, Louis Otieno appears to be rebuilding his life. He made a comeback to Kenyan television last year.
Kati has postponed all suspended elections, including Mombasa and Kakamega gubernatorial races.
We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Careen Chepchumba Kili. May her soul find eternal peace. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified of updates about the case. Until then, Please take care, stay safe, and always trust your gut.